Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another one of these videos where we're going to be interviewing a speaker. This time we are joined by another person who went through the applications process and we have picked out through that. It is John. And John, would you like to introduce yourself? Let us know who you
Yes,
are.
I'm John, but most of you will probably know me as Scrumpmonkey. Like I said, kind of off air there. I don't mind my real name being out there, but I do tend to just go by Scrumpmonkey or Scrump. I've kind of bounced around a lot of different online communities, and I've been on Twitter and banned from Twitter about 9 times. I used to contribute a little bit to Sargon's YouTube channel and Shot by Attacker's YouTube channel, but I mainly do stuff on my own YouTube channel now. Although I'm not really on much social media anymore because they just keep banning me because I'm a bit too spicy. But I don't know. That's kind of been a long running thing since about 2015, so it's nothing new really.
Being banned from Twitter is the sign that he's genuine. He's a good lad. If you get banned from Twitter, you're doing something right.
I don't trust anyone who hasn't at least been banned from Twitter or YouTube once. So
Okay, so well, firstly, before we get to what you're going to be talking about, we'll get into why is it you've applied to speak here, and what is it you want yourself and everyone else to get out of this event.
Well, I originally was kind of cottoned onto the event via some of the people in academic agents community, specifically Evelyn, also known as DG, is one of my real life friends, and they pointed out the event was happening. And I've been looking for kind of something that's a bit beyond the normal online meetups that you mentioned, something a bit more formal. And I've also been doing content that's a bit more serious recently. I thought it was much more in line with kind of the democratization stuff I've been doing and doing stuff that's more history and philosophy focused than simply just, ranting about the headlines. It seems that there's a lot more people who are a bit more into their reading who are in that kind of crowd. So I thought it's kind of a confluence of what I'm doing, what I'm looking to do, and what you guys are setting out. It's kind of perfectly timed for me. So I thought I'd just, I think I was a little bit behind some people in applying for this. But I just thought I'd throw my hat in the ring, and I had a couple of concepts that seemed to go with what you were already talking about. Specifically, a lot of it is the where do we go from here stuff you were talking about, and a lot of the thrust of the event. I like that it's more, again, there's a theme there, and there are people there that I know and have collaborated with in the past, and people I've met personally before. So it just seems to be quite a decent crowd of good people who, in my experience, have made quite well thought out content. So I thought I'd want a piece of that.
So you mentioned your democratization series of videos, and in your pitch, you said what you're going to be doing here is, I suppose, a follow-up video, a follow-up talk to that, or a summary, or a conclusion. Could you go into a bit as to what the democratization series is?
Well, I've been a bit ambitious, and with my co-host Trig, who also helps out with the channel, we've been basically going through kind of section by section of mainly British and US history since like 1900, and looking at the process of how Britain and America became, modern liberal democracies in quotes, and how that process really changed the rights that people have and the way that people view themselves, and how that really came about through a lot of the crises of the First World War, the Great Depression, the Second World War, where people have now learned to accept things that are not normal for most people, and was seen as either emergency powers or temporary things. And it's a good way of taking a step back from current politics and really trying to drill into how did we end up where we are and how do we move forward from where we are. Because it's a cliche to say, but if you don't study history, you are doomed to repeat it, and you are ignorant of what has gone before and what has caused you to be where you are. So I really just wanted to go the opposite direction of a lot of the current event stuff I'd been doing up until that point, and drill into a lot of the British and American history that a lot of it gets overlooked, especially in history education. I remember the absolute gaps I had in school. I even went to a half decent school really, and most people's were even worse than mine. So I thought it would bear having a bit of a retrospective, and going all the way back about 120 years ago. And that's been a bit of a struggle because there's just so much to cover. But specifically, I want to talk about British democracy and how we see ourselves, and how that has changed really through the last 200 years very dramatically, how the British people see themselves. So it's kind of in the same vein, because a lot of the stuff I've been studying history wise really does coincide with the kind of the liberal canon, the British liberal canon, and the idea of, where are we and how do we move forward and how do we get ourselves out of the very apparent mess we seem to have put ourselves in.
Yes, so as you mentioned, both in your description there and previously, this event is where do we go from here? So can you give us a few... Don't give away any spoilers, obviously. We want people to come to the event to hear your conclusions, but a few ideas as to things we could be doing or where we could be going to undo our situation?
Well, one of the biggest things is trying to empower people in the idea that they can do things themselves. They don't need to wait for things to happen. I think one of the most powerful things when you study democracy and when you study how, especially British people see who they are and their place in the world, that they see institutions, be it the NHS, especially the last year, be it, other arms of the government, be it, even things like football or anything like that. They seem to wait for things to happen around them, and that's kind of a consequence of the system they find themselves in. One of the most powerful things you can do is just tell people that they can take action themselves and that they can improve their own lives and their own communities. But that's quite a difficult thing to do, and a lot of the establishment that's been built up over the last 60 years especially very much prevents people from taking control of their own lives and making kind of positive changes in their own communities. But I think it's a broad umbrella, and I will be more specific in the speech that I make and in looking at the kind of the philosophical roots of British individualism and how we can use that as a great way to try and leverage people and shake them out of a lot of their complacency. But it's just telling people that they can just improve their life. They can just do things. Like, you can just act, and you don't need permission to improve what's around you. And I think going around and really kind of almost like evangelizing that message is one of the better things, in my opinion, that we could do to move forward.
Yeah, totally. And in a lot of ways, that right there was the ethos that started off the event we're running. It was, hey, why aren't we just doing this? We don't need permission. We don't need to sit back and get someone to run it for us. It's, why don't we just actually try this? And several months later, here we are. So, yeah, that's definitely a salient message that will be given.
Well, I think I put a little bit of it. My speech is currently being proofread. I've luckily got some good help from people. Shout out to my friend Plasma Rob, who's actually going to be proofreading it for me. Making sure there's no stupid mistakes in there, since I can be a teeny bit dyslexic occasionally. But the thing I found in working in industry, and I tell people I'm an engineer. I don't really go beyond that, because now a lot of people tend to try and get driven out of their jobs for being too specific. But being on the higher end of certain organizations and technical things, you start to realize that actually there isn't anybody behind the curtain. And, the people high up in the power structure and in institutions, they do not know what they're doing. And I think a lot of people don't seem to realize that, or at least they haven't seen that firsthand. And that becomes quite powerful, because a lot of people feel stupid, or they feel helpless, or they don't feel they've read enough or done enough or seen enough. But it's a good bet that the person who tries to put themselves above you isn't as smart as you. And once you start to realize that, you start to realize yourself that, oh shit, if we don't do any of this, if we don't start doing things, nobody's going to, because there is no man behind the curtain.
So what you're saying is we all need to usurp our boss immediately.
Or at least try and consider whether you could do his job better. Because honestly, I know there's a lot of like corporate politics stuff, but if you can, just in your life, if you can generally have confidence in your own ability, that is, again, a huge thing I found a lot of people are sadly lacking. And it gets, that's a bit motivational speaker, but it is very true that one of the biggest mental traps that people fall into is this idea of like learned helplessness, in that they have been taught that they are somebody who is helpless. And that is something that's quite structural. It's something that's taught to people in schools and colleges to a great degree now. It's become a lot more obvious, but it's been going on really for the last at least the last 100 years, if not more, that people are taught that they can't do things in a very, very repetitious manner, so they start to believe it. And it really, a lot of what keeps people down, again, as we've seen with the COVID stuff, is their own mind and their own rules, and they kind of become their own jailer.
So, one final question, and this is, now that we've been through all that, this is going back to the original question, is what do you hope the event to be, or what do you hope people will get out of it?
I don't know. I think people just need to realize that a lot of people behind the screen or people they listen to are very much like them. It's just nice to meet people, really. I hope people are able to just have a nice, relaxed social event. I know people have needed it with the last 18 months we've had. But yeah, I hope it just inspires people. I hope people go away and they make their own content, or they do their own reading and writing, and they talk to people around them, and they maybe start organizing or taking a bit more action in their communities, or at least within the kind of their family and friends circle. It's been very demoralizing for basically the whole of Britain for the past 18 months, and I'm at least hoping that people can let off a bit of steam and be able to kind of be re-energized by it, because it really is the people around you that are able to help you and make you do things. So it's I don't know, I don't want to get too Care Bears, but I really do hope that people can kind of network and be able to support each other and make friends. Really, it's been very difficult to do so.
Yeah, and that was in large part a reason we put on the event, is because this past year we've all had to sit around and do nothing, but it's also been in this past year we've truly, as a community and probably many individuals, have come to appreciate quite how important these real world connections are.
Well, it's kind of ballsy, the timing as well, because when you started planning this, from what I saw, when the first rumblings came out, you had no clue whether or not there'd be like mass gatherings allowed indoors by the time you went to put it on. It was very much done on spec.
Yes, definitely. And fingers crossed everything can still go ahead and there are no sudden changes, but who knows what acts of the British government may lie ahead.
Yeah, I'm hoping Boris Johnson doesn't see his shadow again and there'll be like 10 more weeks of lockdown.
Yes, definitely. So, I believe that's everything. Before we go, is there anything you want to shill? Anything you want to plug?
There's a couple of things. I do a couple of kind of weekly podcasts or weekly shows. I do a Wednesday night stream with Rose of Dawn. Some of you probably will have heard of her. 8 p.m. called Seal of Approval. That's more of a light kind of entertaining, talking about some more of the stuff in the news. Just kind of quite a friendly show. It's not too full on, and it's just quite nice. There's some cute seals there, and if you know Rose, you know she makes quite decent content. A Thursday 9 p.m. I generally stream on my own YouTube channel. I'm just Scrumpmonkey everywhere. So it's one of the names that's never taken. It sounds kind of silly, and I got kind of stuck with it, but I'm quite glad because no one else is, or nothing else is called Scrumpmonkey. So that's just on YouTube. We've been doing a mix of more contemporary streams and the long-running now Democratization Project, which is finally hitting World War II. We're finally getting towards like the post-war consensus, which is like our first little cut-off point. So yeah, that's all I really have to shill. Oh, I occasionally do a little bit of writing on Substack at antipolitics.substack.com, but I've not really had much time recently because my house decided to fall apart a little bit. So I've been trying to work on that instead.
Great. So I believe that's everything, in which case we will wrap up and say goodbye. Well, of course, before we go, I've got to tell you all you should buy a ticket and come to the event so you can hear Scrump here. You can meet him in real life, and you can hear all of our other wonderful speakers. I'll also be there, and I don't think that's a major selling point. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.